So my stepmom kicked me out of my own house. Well, technically, it was my dad's house, but he always told me it would be mine one day. Turns out, he never put it in writing, and Linda, his wife of 10 years, took full advantage of that. I should have seen it coming. She was never really a mother to me, just someone who tolerated my existence because she had to. When my dad was around, she at least kept up the act. Small talk at the dinner table, fake smiles when he looked our way. But the moment he was gone, she dropped the mask entirely. The funeral had barely ended before she started making changes. First, it was little things. Throwing out my dad's old clothes, getting rid of furniture she claimed had bad memories. I didn't think much of it at first. Grief makes people do strange things. But then one evening, she sat me down in the living room, like she was my boss about to fire me. "I know this is hard for you," she started, with that fake sympathy she used when she wanted to pretend she cared. "But this house is legally mine now." I blinked. "What?" She sighed, like I was the dumbest person alive. "Your father left everything to me, the house, the savings, everything. I checked with the lawyer. It's all in my name now." My stomach dropped. That couldn't be right. My dad always told me he was setting things up so I'd be secure, that I'd always have a place to stay. I was his only child. There was no way he'd just leave me with nothing. "I'm giving you 2 weeks," she continued. "I know you're young, and this is a lot to take in, so I'm being generous. You can stay here until then, but after that, you need to find somewhere else." Generous. She really said that like she was doing me a favor. I was 22, just finishing up college, working part-time. I wasn't rolling in cash, and she knew it. She wanted me gone because, in her mind, I wasn't her responsibility anymore. I tried everything, checking with my dad's lawyer, looking through old documents, but she was right. Legally, everything was in her name. My dad must have never updated his will properly, or maybe she convinced him to sign something without realizing what it truly meant. Either way, there was nothing I could do to fight it. So I packed my things. I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I just left. But I wasn't about to let her win that easily. If she thought she could take my home and walk away without consequences, she was in for a surprise. Because if she wanted to take everything from me, I was going to do the same to her. I should have known Linda was always in it for herself. When my dad first met her, I was 12. It had been a few years since my mom passed, and honestly, I wanted him to be happy again. At first, she seemed nice enough, bought me little gifts, acted interested in my school life, but that didn't last long. Once the wedding was over, it was clear she wasn't here to be a stepmom. She was here to secure her place. It started small. She would forget to include me in things. Family dinners out, vacations, holiday shopping trips. My dad was a busy man, always working, and Linda was smart. She didn't outright treat me badly in front of him. Instead, it was passive-aggressive comments, little acts of exclusion that made it clear I wasn't part of her family. Her daughter Sophie, though? Oh, she got everything. New clothes, expensive trips, a car for her 16th birthday. Meanwhile, I had to work for my own spending money. I brought it up to my dad once when I was 17, told him I felt like an outsider in my own home. He reassured me, said he was planning for my future, that I didn't need to worry. "This house will always be yours," he had said. Except, turns out, Linda had other plans. She must have gotten into his ear over the years, convincing him to put everything in her name. Maybe she told him it was easier that way. Maybe she played the "but I'm your wife" card. Whatever it was, he trusted her, and that trust screwed me over. By the time I was in college, I barely interacted with Linda. I commuted to school to save money, worked part-time, and basically kept to myself. Dad was still around, and even though we weren't as close as we used to be, I still felt secure knowing he had my back. Then, out of nowhere, he had a heart attack. It was fast. No warnings, no last goodbyes. One day he was there, and the next, I was burying him. And before I even had time to process it, Linda made her move. She barely waited for the funeral to be over before she started asserting her control. It was like she had been waiting for this moment. The way she spoke to me changed overnight, like she was done pretending to tolerate me. I remember the night it all became real. I was sitting in the kitchen, staring at an old photo of my dad and me fishing when she walked in. "You need to stop moping around," she said, pouring herself a glass of wine. "It's time to start figuring out where you're going next." I looked at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" She sighed dramatically like I was exhausting her. "Jake, I own this house now. I've let you stay out of kindness, but I have my own plans. It's time for you to move on." My hands clenched into fists under the table. My dad wouldn't have wanted this. "Well, your dad isn't here, is he?" she said, smirking. That was the moment I realized. She had won. Legally, she had everything, and I had nothing. Or at least, that's what she thought, because I wasn't about to let her walk away with everything without a fight. Leaving my home was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I packed my things, shoved my whole life into a couple of suitcases, and walked out the front door without looking back. Linda didn't even pretend to care. In fact, she barely acknowledged me as I left, just a smug little smirk as she sipped her overpriced wine on the couch. I crashed at a friend's place for a while, trying to figure out my next move. Every fiber of my being screamed that this wasn't fair, that my dad would never have wanted this. But legally, my hands were tied. I didn't have the money for a lawyer, and even if I did, Linda had been careful. She had the paperwork to back up her claim. I was angry, no, furious. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just mad about losing the house. I was mad about everything. Years of being treated like an outsider. Years of watching her and Sophie get everything handed to them while I got scraps. No, I wasn't going to let this go. I started digging. At first, I just wanted to know how she pulled this off. How did she get my dad to leave everything to her? What I found was even worse than I expected. Turns out, Linda wasn't as smart as she thought she was. While going through some old emails and bank statements my dad had sent me before he passed, I found something odd. Large amounts of money being moved around. Withdrawals, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. And a loan. A massive loan my dad had taken out against the house. Why would my dad need a loan that big when he was always careful with money? The answer hit me like a truck. Linda. She must have convinced him to take out the loan, probably for house improvements or some other excuse. But where did the money actually go? That's when I noticed Sophie's name on a few transactions. Expensive tuition payments, luxury shopping sprees, a damn car. Linda had been bleeding my dad dry, funneling money to her daughter, while acting like she was the perfect wife. And my dad? He was too trusting, too in love to see it. I saw red, but I didn't just want revenge. I wanted to ruin her. First, I needed to get back on my feet. I found a job, nothing glamorous, just enough to get by. I saved every penny, keeping my expenses low. My goal was simple: get my own place, but not just any place. I wanted something better than what she stole from me. It took time, but eventually I did it. I found an incredible deal on a beautiful house. Not just bigger, but in a much better neighborhood than my dad's old place. It needed some work, but I didn't care. It was mine. Now, it was time for part 2 of my plan. I started leaking information. Linda had been bragging all over town about how she was living comfortably, pretending like she was some savvy widow who knew how to handle finances. What she didn't know was that her little financial secrets weren't so secret anymore. I made sure her loan problems reached the wrong ears. I dropped hints to neighbors, accidentally let details slip in the right circles. Word spread fast, and just like that, her perfect little life started to crumble. It didn't take long for Linda's world to start falling apart. See, when people think they've won, they get careless. Linda had spent years acting like she was untouchable, flaunting my dad's money like it was hers to burn. But here's the thing about people like her. They never plan for when the money runs out. And thanks to my little information leaks, people started paying attention. First, it was the bank. The whispers I had spread about her financial situation weren't just rumors. They were backed by the numbers. That massive loan my dad had taken out, it hadn't been paid off properly. Linda had been making minimum payments, barely keeping things afloat, thinking she could keep living in luxury forever. Then, one day, she got a notice. Foreclosure. The house she had stolen from me? She was about to lose it. I heard about it from an old neighbor who still kept in touch. Apparently, Linda had a full meltdown, when she realized the bank was coming for her. She tried to negotiate, but there was no saving her. Without my dad's income, without any real financial planning, she was drowning in debt. I wish I could have seen the look on her face when she realized she was going to be homeless. But it got even better. Sophie, her precious daughter, the one she had funneled all my dad's money into, wasn't doing too well either. She had been living the high life off Linda's schemes, but when the money stopped flowing, she panicked. She had no job, no real skills, just an expensive degree that Linda had barely managed to pay for. And when Sophie realized her cushy lifestyle was crumbling, she bailed, moved in with a friend, leaving Linda to deal with the mess alone. Now, I could have just sat back and enjoyed watching everything go down. But no, I wanted the final blow to come from me. So, on the day she was officially kicked out of the house, I showed up. She was standing outside, surrounded by boxes, looking furious, probably hoping for some last-minute miracle. I stepped out of my car, leaned against it, and smiled. Rough day? The way her face twisted in rage was beautiful. What are you doing here? She spat. Oh, just wanted to see how you were doing. It's funny, isn't it? I gestured to the for sale sign on the lawn. You took everything from me and now you have nothing. Her hands clenched into fists. This is your fault? I laughed. No, Linda. This is your fault. You stole from my dad. You spent every penny like it would never run out. And now, you're paying the price. She opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. Oh, by the way, I pulled out a set of keys and dangled them in front of her. I just bought a house. Way nicer than this one, actually. You should see the kitchen. It's gorgeous. The way her face dropped was priceless. She had kicked me out of my home, thinking she had won. But in the end, I was the one moving into something better, while she had nowhere to go. I turned to leave, but not before throwing one last line over my shoulder. Enjoy your new place. Oh, wait, you don't have one. And with that, I drove off. After that final confrontation with Linda, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't had in years. For the first time, I wasn't the one struggling. I wasn't the one being forced out, looking for a place to stay, or worrying about what came next. That was her problem now. I kept tabs on her for a little while, mostly through old neighbors who were more than happy to spill the gossip. Apparently, Linda tried to keep up appearances, acting like the foreclosure wasn't a big deal. She told people she had chosen to sell the house, that she was downsizing to something more manageable. But no one bought it. The reality? She ended up in a dingy apartment in a not-so-great part of town. It was a far cry from the comfortable life she had stolen from my dad. And without his money, she was just another struggling widow, forced to finally live within her means. Sophie didn't stick around to help. From what I heard, she bolted the moment things got rough. She had been spoiled her whole life, raised to expect luxury without ever lifting a finger to earn it. So when the money ran out, she panicked. She tried staying with friends for a while, but that didn't last long. Turns out, people don't like freeloaders. Eventually, she moved out of state, probably looking for someone else to leech off of. The funny thing, she never even checked in on Linda. The woman who had sacrificed everything for her daughter was now completely alone. And me? I was doing better than ever. The house I bought was more than just a place to live. It was proof that I didn't need anyone's handouts, that I didn't need her. Every wall I painted, every room I furnished, every little detail was mine. I finished my degree, landed a solid job, and slowly built a life I was proud of. A life that Linda wasn't a part of. And honestly, that was the best part. For years, I had lived under her shadow, constantly reminded that I wasn't truly welcome, that my place in my own family home was temporary. Now, she was the one left out in the cold. And I had moved on. But just when I thought I'd heard the last of her, she came crawling back. One day, out of nowhere, I got a text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Linda. I know things ended badly, but I could really use some help right now. Maybe we can talk? I stared at the message for a long time. I could almost hear her voice, that same fake kindness she used when she wanted something. For a brief second, I considered responding. Then I remembered every cruel remark, every time she made me feel like an outsider, every moment of humiliation when she took my home and acted like I was nothing. I blocked her number without replying. She had spent years making sure I felt like I wasn't part of her family. Now, she was just another stranger, and I was completely fine with that.